I'll start now to tell the stories handed down in the Cherrington and Stephenson's families. My great-grandfather Cherrington, Daniel W. Cherrington, was from West Virginia. My great-grandmother Cherrington was Ellen Stephenson Cherrington from Kentucky. I'll start first with Ellen's family since some of the things were before she was married. In fact, they weren't married until after the Civil War. Ellen Stephenson's mother died when she was quite young. She had a stepmother her growing up years. She had brothers, and I don't know how many or their names. Her father raised horses, and from what I have learned, the family was quite comfortably fixed financially. I think she was used to having pretty much what she wanted and some of what she didn't want, if it was the newest style. It is told that when she was a girl, she was invited to a fancy party, and her stepmother bought her a new dress, or had it made, I don't know which. The house dress had pantolettes, which didn't please Ellen at all, but it was the newest style, so she had to wear them. They tell the time that the family was going to the fair. The older people in the family rode in buggies, and a wagon was taken along, maybe to carry supplies, who knows. The younger people rode horses. Ellen's horse had a colt. Her father decided that it was old enough to leave, so Ellen rode her horse, and supposedly the colt was at home. When they got to the fair, she discovered the colt had gotten out and followed. It had had a hold of her knitted cape and raveled a good deal of it out. It wasn't considered proper for her not to have a wrap, so she stayed in the wagon till her stepmother bought her a wrap. When she came, it was a shawl, which was one of the newest of styles then. When it was seen that there was going to be a war, Ellen's father, not wanting to be on the side of the South, moved into Ohio in Jackson County. His sons joined the Union Army. How Ellen met Daniel Cherrington I was never told, but they did meet. Daniel had enlisted in the Union Army. Ellen was in the habit of each morning riding into town to get the news of where the armies were, so she would know where her brothers were. One morning when she was riding in, she met a neighbor. He was whipping his horses up, and he yelled at her to go back. Morgan was in the area raiding for horses, and to tell her father to get his horses hid. He had a young boy working for him, so they took the horses into the hills, into caves, and kept them there till Morgan left. The story of Daniel Cherrington mostly starts with the war. He was a small man according to the description on his enlistment and discharge papers. There are 3 sets. The first 2 enlistments for a given number of years. Then he re-enlisted the same day of the discharge. The final enlistment paper said the duration. My mother said that he rode with Sherman, or under Sherman. He received a medal and was wounded with a saber. She said the men were supposed to have been so vicious she could never imagine that, as she remembered a mild-mannered man that went to church and Sunday school and taught the men's class. In any event, when the war was over, Custer was being sent west to fight Indians. He was trying to keep as many of the regiment together to go with him as possible, but Daniel Cherrington refused to re-enlist, saying he was going home to get married. Now, if he had gone, my dears, we wouldn't be here to tell this story. Daniel went back to Ohio and married Ellen. They farmed in Ohio, and most of their children were born there, all but Jessie. I think she was born in Iowa. She was much younger than the others. Their children were Willard, Meta, Nora, Rose, Ferd, John, and Jessie. They lost a set of twins. My grandmother was Meta. I think the family had it rather tough in Ohio. In Ohio, the soil was not good. Meta told that her mother insisted they eat everything on their plates. If one of them left something, they had to eat it cold before they could have their next meal. She said more than once she had to eat a cold pancake before she could have her supper. That was when she was in school, so the pancake was left from breakfast. I have often wondered what the dog got to eat. She said one time after all the kids got together and picked wild berries and sold them. They took the money and bought a set of German silver spoons for Ellen for her birthday. I have the spoons. One of them my grandfather Reed cut the handle and bent it to make a baby spoon for me. I guess it upset my mother very much. They also told of the time they were making apple butter. At that time, canning was pretty quaint. To keep fruit, it was dried or cooked down into jam, very thick, and put in stone jars, so as the story goes, they were cooking down apple butter in a large iron kettle in the backyard over an open fire. One youngster was stationed to keep stirring with a large wooden paddle. While they were cooking and stirring, something scared up the chickens, and an old hen flew over the fence and landed in the kettle of apple butter. Later in the day, the minister came to call. When Ellen saw him coming, she instructed the older ones to catch a chicken and dress it and prepare dinner for the minister. Later on at the table, Ferd, who was just a small boy, piped up and said, "Is that the hen that flew into the apple butter?" Grandpa Cherrington brought his family to Lewis. Just what he did, I do not know. I think he worked on the railroad. I don't know for sure. I know he farmed too, because one time they lived west of Griswold. John Cherrington told me that about swimming in the pond that Ralph's grandfather had made with a dam east of the buildings. He said every boy in the neighborhood swam there, most of them shedding their clothes on the way. He said in later years he wondered what Mrs. Book thought of them. While living in Lewis, Ellen came down with typhoid fever, so Daniel and Meta took turns sitting up with her at night. Daniel worked at his job by day, and Meta took care of the family and took care of her mother. When Ellen was getting better, a neighbor came to call. Ellen told her how they were starving her. The lady offered to sit up with her that night. After the family had gone to bed, she brought a lot of goodies in for Ellen to eat. Needless to say, Ellen had a severe relapse. The doctor had a few choice words for the neighbor. The Cherringtons moved out to Nebraska. Most of the older children were married and settled, but Daniel and Ellen had a sale and went to an area in north-central Nebraska. The ranch was just north of Springview. They lived in a sod house for a while and then built a frame house. I imagine that they homesteaded. Grandma Reed, that is Meta, took my mother and her brothers, Tim and Lyle, up there to visit. They apparently were exposed to scarlet fever on the train. Tim and Lyle came down first, and of course diphtheria followed, which took many lives then. They had it very hard, especially Lyle. Then Mother came down with it. Grandpa Reed got excited, and he went up, and he got it, and they had him to take care of also. Grandpa always blamed the area for making his family sick. Ellen died after a long illness with cancer, and Daniel was diabetic and made his home with Meta. He died at the age of 64. They are both buried at Lewis, Iowa. Ferd Cherrington came to visit my mother, and he told the story of hiding the horses. He was on a train and visiting with an older man, and he told the story, but couldn't remember their names. He was the boy who helped hide the horses. When he finished, Ferd told him, as he had heard the story many times. Ferd asked Mother if she knew what had happened to the red necktie that Custer's wife had knit. She had knit one for each man in the outfit, also the ring made from the rebel's knee. Mother had no knowledge of these articles. She had Daniel's discharge papers and medal, as well as a pin with a lock of Ellen's hair in it that he had carried through the war. Jessie was much younger than the rest. Meta asked her what she wanted when her father died. She wanted the marble top from the chest that had been given to the Cherringtons by neighbors when they went to Nebraska. They thought it was a strange thing to want. I don't think her family really knew where she went or what happened to her. Daniel Cherrington had a sister, Virginia. Mother said she came to visit once when she and Tim were small. She said she wore a black taffeta dresses and smoked a black briar pipe, a small one. For a woman to smoke a pipe had been fashionable when she was young. Mother said she had dental plates, and she told Tim to hold his hand, and she put the teeth on them. It frightened Tim, and he threw them down and broke them. She thought Tim should be punished, but no one else agreed with her.